Beer yoga is a health hazard in waiting. This is from an article in Medium and written by Ruchira. No, it's not cool. It's a grave insult to genuine yoga and puts people at risk of serious health issues, disease, and injury. They went in looking for nirvana and came out drowned in inebriation, as far away from nirvana as someone possibly could be. What happens when you mix sugar and poison and when you adulterate your daily morning coffee with sushi? This is precisely how incompatible yoga and beer sipping is. Not just that they are inherently contradictory, but this practice is a health disaster in waiting. It's time someone called a spade a spade. This is not a purist spiel, but that of someone who is trying to see through the marketing sham that beer yoga is. Originating in Germany by the name beer yoga, its creators claim, "We take the philosophies of yoga and pair it with the pleasure of beer drinking to reach your highest level of consciousness." Nothing could be farther from the truth. Ask anyone who has walked the path of yoga long enough to reach any height of consciousness, and they'll tell you that drowning yourself in substance, you only manipulate your state of consciousness instead of letting it rise. But before I get into talking about why beer yoga is a poison for serious yogis of any measure, let us understand what yoga actually means. The heart of true yoga. Spiritual teacher, humanitarian leader, and founder of the International Association for Human Values said, "Yoga is a complete science. It unites the body, mind, spirit, and the universe. Yoga brings that much needed and longed for peace and ecstasy in every individual. For a sane life, yoga is almost indispensable. If you want to be sane, sensitive, strong, and intuitive, you have to follow yoga. Yoga is not just a physical exercise or asanas. It's an emotional integration and spiritual elevation with a touch of mystic element. Yoga lifts your eyes up from the mundane life that we live. And meditation definitely has to be a part of yoga. Otherwise, it will remain just an exercise. The word yoga comes from Sanskrit, the ancient language of India and Nepal. And the word yuj refers to the union of the individual consciousness with the universal consciousness. Yoga is mentioned in the ancient Sanskrit philosophical texts that carry the essence of the Eastern philosophies, such as Rig Veda and the Katha Upanishad. One of the most definitive texts for a sincere seeker of yoga is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Combined before 400 CE, Patanjali describes yoga in the second aphorism. Translation: in the state of yoga, all misconceptions or vrittis that can exist in the mutable aspect of human beings, chitta, in the form of thoughts or modulations of the mind, disappear. The more you look into yoga's philosophy, the more you will see that it's sacrilegious to introduce substances like alcohol into a practice designed to bring about spiritual evolution. Alcohol exasperates vritti, misconceptions, and takes you away from the true state of yoga. I'll explain below why you can do more harm than good, especially for those who are just setting on the path of yoga. The health dangers of beer yoga. Receptors that metabolize alcohol, ADH, located in the cell systole, aid in producing acetaldehyde. The body doesn't have an efficient mechanism to deal with acetaldehyde deposited in liver cells. It can cause the disease known as fatty liver. The primary function of the organ is detoxification, and while yoga exercise enhances liver function, with the involvement of beer, overindulgence introduces risks. Alcohol intake inhibits our sensory, cognitive, and motor functions. Beyond a certain point, this results in slurred speech, impaired judgment, and an increased risk of injury at practicing yoga postures. In contrast, a genuine alcohol-free yoga practice should heighten these functions. When your various internal resources are engaged in dealing with the toxic substance in your system, it becomes difficult to pay attention to your breath, mind, and bodily sensations, which are fundamental to experiencing yoga and making progress. What sensible drinkers have a drink, they know to drink plenty of water and take more proteins along with it, since alcohol is acidic. But there's a little scope to do that while practicing yoga, since it's supposed to be done on an empty stomach. Drinking beer on an empty stomach can increase the risk of peptic ulcer disease. Alcohol abuse can also lead to gout. Also, if you're diabetic, you may have been advised to do some sort of physical exercise to regulate glucose levels, since diabetes is primarily a lifestyle disorder. But when yoga is combined with beer, the activity can only exacerbate the condition. If alcohol is consumed daily, the metabolic tolerance of alcohol, ADH receptors, increases by 30% in 2 weeks. This means you will incrementally need more beer intake to feel the same high. This is subtle and plays out over time. By then you may be hooked on beer yoga for all the wrong reasons. Beer yoga could easily become a go-to option for alcoholics. It's medically documented that 30% of alcoholics are prone to anxiety disorders. If they turn to beer yoga to deal with this, they may get into another negative cycle. Alcohol is known to affect the sleep cycle negatively. Yoga, on the other hand, is extremely beneficial for getting a restful sleep, which is essential for restoration of the body. A lack of quality sleep has a broad range of adverse effects, which may further encourage a person to seek solace in alcohol or even beer yoga. Just don't. Alcohol is admittedly an accessible means of entertainment, and temporary manipulation of cognition can lead you to experience some highs. But mixing it up with a practice which is meant to take you above and away from your mental afflictions, purely for commercial gains, is unfortunate to say the least. Whether it started to make yoga relatable to the masses who love beer, or to separate yoga from its history, it can only be hazardous on a spiritual, physiological, and mental level. It's insulting to those who have practiced, preserved, and carried on the richness of yoga in its highest and most effective form as a complete science throughout the millennium, which is now even covered by insurance if it's qualified yoga therapists. Beer yoga is a sign of a sad state of affairs, and this ancient practice is in. People are going to any length to exploit yoga commercially, which was never its intention.